As a young queer boy growing up in a very small town in the fire and brimstone Baptist belt of Mississippi, sometimes it felt like the only times I was genuinely heard and seen were when I watched a horror movie. If I had to personify the genre, I would say that he was my first love, maybe even my first heartbreak. And nowadays, he doesn't get under my skin the way he did in the beginning, but there is still something that keeps me by his side. I've always felt drawn to horror. I remember hiding in every closet and cabinet of the first house I ever lived in, watching my mom's selection of 2000s horror DVDs on the portable DVD player she had given me for long car rides. Maybe I was intrigued by the cover of Fear.com or Xmas. Maybe it was The Strangers. Maybe I was drawn in by that taboo feeling that I got watching such gruesome imagery. That feeling is one that I would definitely grow accustomed to, being gay in a place where it was not always okay to swing that way. Maybe I kept watching for the relentlessly real representation of rejects. Moments of acceptance, whether from myself or external forces, were always fleeting in my hometown, and honestly, I still get butterflies seeing those feelings explored and sometimes resolved through the means of a horror movie. Oftentimes, the main characters of horror movies are social outliers, misfits, undesirables. There are exceptions, of course, but generally speaking, many of us, as imperfect as we are, can see ourselves in these stories. Whether it takes place in a high school with a protagonist that suffers from lack of friends, or they have plenty of friends and instead of high school, the story takes place in a cabin in the woods, in which the more promiscuous characters of the bunch get slaughtered one by one. In either case, you can find that the final girl is often the black sheep of the cast, and that's ultimately what fuels their survival and our empathy for them and their hope to survive. This goes for villains too, as often the villain of a horror tale is scorned and alienated from society, which drives them to seek revenge on whoever lies in their path. These tales, while vastly different from one another, have a thread that weaves them together: a complex character in the forefront of the gore. In spite of all the reasons I could come up with to love horror movies, I've heard the genre receive a lot of flack during my time on this earth. Terms like lowbrow, cheap, and degenerate are only a few words that I have frequently heard associated with horror, especially during its upcoming. From my understanding, when horror cinema first emerged, critics and audiences for the most part did not take the genre seriously like other film genres, like action, drama, comedies. Even today, people and critics alike struggle to see past the blood and violence that horror would go down to be infamous for. And this is often to the detriment of the morals, themes, and commentaries that horror has to offer. That being said, in more recent years, the genre has undoubtedly become more popular amongst audiences, and it's often considered successful in the box office. But still, it receives little critical acclaim or Academy recognition. Keeping up with award ceremonies throughout the years, it's undeniable how overlooked the horror genre is. And the only horror movie that has ever been awarded Best Picture at the Oscars was The Silence of the Lambs. And only 7 horror films have ever been nominated in the history of the Oscars as of today. The movies in question are The Exorcist from 1973, Jaws from 1975, The Sixth Sense from 1999, Black Swan 2010, Get Out 2017, The Substance from 2024, and as I mentioned earlier, The Silence of the Lambs. To me, this is very unfortunate for quite a few reasons. First, I should point out that awards are only monetary, and to me, they couldn't really matter less. I think that horror has won the hearts of many people, and that is worth much more than any award. But with that being said, the whole conundrum of horror going unrecognized is important because in this capitalist, money-hungry environment that movies are made in nowadays, critical acclaim, audience reception, and accolades that are tied to directors and their ideas determine whether movies will be greenlit to be made. And if horror is ever to be largely ignored by the masses, then there's no guarantee that studios will fund the unique horror movies, the original horror movies, as they might not see any money from it. I wonder how many good movies have never made it to an audience because of this. Oh well, at least we'll get another Conjuring spinoff. That was sarcastic. This unfortunate truth of horror movies going unrecognized by the Academy had seemed to be shifting to me in 2024 with the conversation starting horror that got released that year, like The Substance, not only getting recognized, but sweeping quite a lot of smaller award ceremonies. Demi Moore's phenomenal performance in The Substance was what I thought undoubtedly would win Best Picture, Best Performance, whatever have you. But I was wrong. It went to Anora. Which, no hate to Onora, okay? I liked Nora, but I don't think that it was as good as The Substance, personally. But I guess that it's all subjective at the end of the day. Another reason this is important is because actors pour their hearts into their roles, and because most horror is psychological, it has to take a great deal of energy from them to portray these emotions. And the actors in their performances are not recognized enough by the award ceremonies, which is unfortunate because that determines how much money they can ask for when they take their next role. Actors who deliver stellar performances are often never awarded, most likely due to the genre of the film not being taken as seriously as the others. A great example other than Demi Moore is Toni Collette's performance in 2018's Hereditary. That dinner table scene has been one of the most quoted things in our generation's lexicon, and I hear that scene referenced quite a lot. However, when it came out, not only did Toni Collette not receive any Oscar nominations, but the whole entire movie, Hereditary, didn't receive a nomination in the Oscars that year. And it's just a great example for how the Academy Awards have historically overlooked the horror genre. But nevertheless, Toni Collette most definitely received my personal favorite actress award that year. And I truly hope that the genre will get its flowers from the people that it relies on for success after all these years of groundbreaking cinema and commentary on our society. In a society that is so brutal, the environment of a horror film seems reflective of the world as we know it and how ruthless it can be. Horror can redefine boundaries and can have such a profound effect on people, not to mention the art of bringing the grit and gore to life with practical effects and movie magic. The one time that I will give the Oscars credit is when they introduced a category known as the Best Makeup Award for a movie called An American Werewolf in London, because that movie had such detailed practical effects for the werewolf transition that the Academy Awards decided that they needed to recognize it that year. And horror often takes lots of logistics and creative thinking when it comes to replicating such gore. And although I'm not gonna say it's better than any other genre, I will say that it's evident that for the amount of effort and creativity that gets put into these movies, they just are not viewed on the same level. The final act of a horror movie can serve as a rejection or a primal scream of freedom, and sometimes even victory. Horror is one of the most prolific ways of changing society, pointing out humans' strange intricacies, and often a commentary on society. Sometimes it inspires change. Quote, "Horror has consistently reflected where we are in our society, and perhaps the most common way that we can kind of talk about what we're quote." From film critic Richard Newby. All this to say, horror has my heart. I'm not sure if one day we'll see horror get its flowers from the big awards ceremonies, or if general audiences will start to recognize it the way that I think it deserves. But either way, horror has always had the same heart, and I could think of so many scary movies that won my personal movie of the year, and I'll forever be grateful for horror because it's been there for me throughout my childhood, and it's brought each member of my family together in the living room, and it brought us all as much discomfort as it did joy. I treasure each DVD on my bookshelf that within holds a cautionary tale of horror and its positive or negative outcomes for our society. Stories like that are crucial in the entertainment industry, and crucial for the outcasts that seek representation, and crucial for people seeking a cheap thrill, even crucial for those looking to see the human psyche and body dissected and explored. Horror leaves little room for perfection and glamour, which is what I think makes it so profound and raw. I might not have noticed such intricacies when I watched my very first horror movie, Insidious, but the impact that movie had on me was undeniable. I had nightmares inspired by the movie's antagonist until I was 14. I actually remember a very specific nightmare in which that demon, I believe he's called the Lipstick Demon, he had kidnapped my little sister and he took her to hell, and in the dream I had to take a cab to go and rescue her, and it was like a ghost cab, and the driver was Fran Drescher from The Nanny, and she was split in half, and her top half was in the driver's seat driving the cab, and her bottom half was sitting cross-legged in the passenger seat. And we made small talk, and then she drove me to rescue my sister. Anyways, I can finally see beyond the paranormal mumbo-jumbo jump scares. I can see beyond the bad CGI or the well-done practical makeup. Now I can see the family dynamic that's crucial to the theme and the plot of the movie. I can actually remember that time when I was about 7 and my mom had ran faster than I had ever seen her run to scoop me up from the concrete that I hit my head on when I fell off my scooter. I see a family that relies on their dynamic for survival. I see my mom picking me up from my bed and running away from the first home that we ever had to escape the oppressive life that we had with my dad. I see a family and a drive not just to survive, but to truly live. I see me and my mom making breakfast and running on the concrete of the one scenic trail that my hometown so graciously had to offer. I see the first house we ever lived in alone, A one-bedroom, little beige house, far away from the horror of our past. I see us on the floor of that empty house, eating fast food. I see my Happy Meal, and the slivers of light coming through the blinds. I see horrifically beautiful freedom, and what people will do to attain it. Most horror is more than meets the eye, and I have relied on it for butterflies since I was 5, watching 2010's Insidious.
It's not the house that's haunted.
It's your son. Yeah.